So welcome. Thank you all so much for joining us today on your Wednesday evening. We're really pleased. There are so many of you here. I think we're around 50 of us and from so many different parts of the world. So we really appreciate it. And now to introduce myself. So my name's Iman Kara and I am a part of the Women's Activities portfolio here in the UK. We are dedicated to supporting women and their families throughout their life stages, and we've been running these virtual sisterhood forums for women to come together as one Jamaat and to support and uplift each other and hopefully make really meaningful connections. We really hope you enjoy this session, which we really want to be informal and interactive. So please do comment in the chat throughout the session with your thoughts, as well as using the breakout rooms, like I mentioned later on, in which you can share how you're finding the session. So what's the session about today? As I'm sure many of you know, the topic of the conversation today is titled Navigating Changes at Work, Rise Up. And I am thrilled to be introducing two of our wonderful speakers leading the conversation today. Nazreen Visram, who is Head of Charities for the Public Sector at Barclays, and Natasha Chatur, the Happiness Coach. Thank you both so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to hear more because I have just recently started a job, so I know it's going to be really invaluable. And I'm going to hand over to you.
Positive. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Iman. And it's fantastic to be here. So I guess, shall I kick off by introducing myself, Natasha? Would you like to go first?
Go for it, Naz.
Brilliant. So my name is Nazreen Visram. I am the Head of Charities at Barclays. I've been in the corporate space now for 15 years. And I've got to say, this is probably one of the most unusual years of my kind of working career. I tend to be in the office sort of 4 days a week and work 1 day from home. And since March of this year, since the lockdown happened, I have been working from home. So for the past 7 months, I've literally been at my desk in my office at home. And it's been a real change. And we're going to explore some of those sort of changes and emotions as we go through this session. But it's been really busy working in the banking sector because being part of the charity sector, you will know that charities have been heavily impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. And just to give you some scope, it's estimated that charities will lose around £12.4 billion worth of income that they need to deliver services to the most vulnerable in society. So we've been supporting a lot of our charity clients through this time. And equally, I just read a stat today that actually 7 million people in the next 12 months will seek support from a charity. And 3 out of 5 of those people will be doing it for the first time. So the huge pressure on the charity sector is immense as we go into the next 12 months. So my job, along with my team, is to really support them with banking services and help them with all sorts of challenges that they face. I manage a virtual team, so I'm one of 90 people, part of the leadership team. We've got members of the team all across the country, so that's been a challenge, managing people virtually. And to be really open, some of my team have had to navigate some real personal issues. So I've got people living on their own and have been working from home on their own for some time, people isolating because they're high risk. I've had lots of members of my team with real well-being challenges. I've got single parents in my team who've had to work and homeschool their child. So it's been really interesting for me as a leader of these people to really support them and help them and enable them to do their job to the best of their ability. And at the same time, be able to do my job, homeschool my child and manage a home. So I think, I'll pause there because there's lots I could probably talk about around my experiences over the past 6-7 months, but I'll hand over to Natasha now for an introduction, and then we can delve into these areas in a bit more detail.
Thanks, Naz, and hello everyone. I'm Natasha, the Work Happiness Coach. So this year I've had quite different work changes in a couple of ways. I left my corporate job last year after 15 years and left the corporate world entirely to set up my business, which I started as a full-time coach in January this year. So my job was already kind of fully working from home, but it was the first time I was working on my own. So I didn't have, a manager or the teammates or kind of the wider departments and teams that I was used to. And this became kind of much more pronounced for me in COVID. And I needed real immense discipline and perseverance to keep working on my business every day, even though I wasn't seeing the return that I'd planned. And, you know, everyone's been going through something. I certainly felt the distinction of having come from that environment, having to cope with the emotional fallout of what was happening to my business on my own day to day. I had to be quite reactive and adapt to a changing landscape. I had quite a decent amount of work planned for March through to May, which disappeared overnight. It had taken me three months to build up. I had to pivot my business from working with businesses as a primary target audience, because, you know, HR departments were just in chaos, and pivoted to working more or targeting individuals rather, because as a result of COVID, lots of people were reflecting on work and how happy they were and feeling stuck and finding it tricky to navigate those feelings. I had to reforecast my revenue potential and my cash flow and all those kinds of admin-y things that I was doing for the first time, and I was doing them for the first time in a global pandemic. So there was a lot of quick shifts, you know, for networking and building relationships that I needed to do. And working on my own and living on my own, I think, without access to my social life, to face-to-face interactions, the usual kind of release and energy I get from socializing, from traveling, from meeting people. I kind of didn't have any of that either. So when it comes to my changes at work, it's been a roller coaster ride. And I do have more of a sense of emotional stability and some business certainty starting to appear, which is really, really helpful. But I think I'm still on guard, if you like, with what else might come.
I think, Natasha, you've touched on something there, and that's emotions and roller coaster, two words I think that really resonate for me. And I'd be really interested to hear from everyone here today. It's great to have so many of you, and we've got 65 already joined today, which is fantastic. And I think, you know, these are opportunities to share and learn from each other, and I'd really love to hear the emotions that you've been feeling during this time, particularly in relation to work. Some days I get up really excited for work because I know I've got a really busy day and there's lots ahead of me, and I wake up with enthusiasm and excitement. And then other days I just don't feel it. I don't actually want to do any work because I'm feeling quite low. I'm, you know, similar to what you said, Natasha, missing my friends, missing my family, and also missing the office. I'm a very social people person, so I think, you know, being in the office and interacting with my team is a big part of what I do. And also worrying about my team. I spend a lot of time worrying about individuals with people issues, with personal issues, and how I can support them. So there's a lot that you're carrying on your shoulders, and when you're at home, sort of eating, sleeping and working in the same place, those emotions can almost you know, sort of been blown out of proportion sometimes, I think. So I'd be really interested to hear from this group, if you wouldn't mind just sharing in the chat below some of the emotions that you've been feeling in the past 6 or 7 months when it comes to sort of work and whatever your situation is. And I think while people are doing that, it'd be really interesting to hear, Natasha, around, you know, some of the stats around how women have been impacted working the way they do, and as a result of the pandemic.
Yeah, there's the impact on women workers globally has been disproportionate, actually. And there's an article on the Harvard Business Review that outlines the following stats. And this is a little bit I think it's from around May time, so it's not totally current, but it is from kind of when we were in proper lockdown. And the stats include women's jobs are 1.8 times more vulnerable to the crisis than men's jobs, 1.8, so nearly twice as vulnerable. Women do on average 75% of the world's total unpaid care work. So the burden of unpaid care, which has risen in the pandemic, falls disproportionately on women. And the third stat is that the pandemic may also have had a disproportionate impact on female entrepreneurship, including women-owned micro-enterprises in emerging economies. Enterprises in emerging economies account for a high share of female labour. So there's 3 stats there, and it'd be interesting to see kind of longer term impact of this, but I mean, that's pretty significant to be hitting all, 50% of the workforce.
Those are really kind of stark stats, actually, Natasha. And I think, the impact of this is going to take a long time to kind of normality, really. I don't know if you can see in the chat, but people have started to share some of their emotions, which is really interesting. And I resonate. Defeated some days, energized other days, without having to commute. I completely agree. The commute has been the lack of commute, I should say, has been a blessing. We've had, overwhelmed, burnt out, feeling low, feeling distracted, not able to focus, fear of not having any work. Had a very quiet September, but it's picking up now. Missing office banter after 6 months at home. Someone started teaching, and thank you. You've all been really open, actually. Some really interesting insights here. Tired, loss of sense of self. Distracted, anxious, overwhelmed.
These are really big emotions, aren't they? I think, like, if we just sit with the emotions that are coming through on that chat, sometimes just experiencing one of these at one moment in time can be, really significant. But experiencing so many of these big emotions over a prolonged period of time is really, really significant.
Yeah, absolutely. Miss my team. I miss my team too, actually, and I miss them terribly, and I tell them that every day, actually. But yes, you've just. I've seen another comment in there around adapting to the new way of working and looking forward to that, which is an interesting concept. I think we're going to explore as well.
Yeah, motivated to adapt working habits. Yeah, so some positive stuff coming through as well. So thank you everyone for sharing that, and keep sharing what's coming up for you in the chat, and we'll keep an eye on that. But as we can see, there's been some clear impacts and changes that have been felt by so many of us. And Naz, it would be great to hear a bit more about your experience. One of the things that's come up, and I saw it in the chat, is boundaries. It's a big one. There's a huge merging of our work and home space, and it occurred really, really quickly. And our usual boundaries and lines of distinction of, the commute or the office or the gym kind of were wiped away overnight. What was your experience?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, and I talk to my fellow female colleagues and friends about this all the time. So when we went into lockdown in March, I actually was thinking to myself, this is great, I've lost 2 hours of commute. That means I can get up early, I can exercise, I can do all these great things, I can learn a new skill, etc., etc. Well, I can tell you now, apart from I've just started to exercise, none of that really happened. And I guess what was happening is my home life and work life had merged into one, and those lines were really blurred because I was getting up early, logging on early, working, and actually I was working later than I normally would, than I would be in the office. So I found that actually being in the office, I was much more disciplined about my time. So I'd have to be home for a certain time to pick up my son, or be home at a certain time to, take him to a club or whatever it may be. So I was actually much more disciplined in the office, and then coming home, it kind of all went to pot, really. And then then the homeschooling piece came in, and oh my goodness, I mean, I am not a maths teacher, I'm not a geography teacher, and I realized actually I would never make a very good teacher. So I have a lot of respect for all the teachers out there. And I was wearing different hats, I'm the chef, the IT help desk, the cleaner, the head of charities, all in one. And I was thinking to myself, gosh, this is really hard. And I've really got to start putting in some boundaries. But I guess my message to all of you is, don't be so hard on yourself. I think, as women, we tend to just put so much pressure on ourselves as well, and we strive for this perfectionism, and it's okay some days to get it wrong. So I think that's the one thing around boundaries and balance, and you have to be disciplined about time and put time. So I've started to put things in my diary, going for walks. I see somebody else has put that in the chat, going for walks, having my exercise in the morning, catching up with for a coffee with a friend locally, just taking time away from my desk and making sure I finish at a reasonable time. It took me time to get there, but I got there. And I always remember a great piece of advice that one of my bosses gave me, and that was, you can have it all, but not at the same time. And actually, you've got to remember that different things in your life will take priority. So, you know, if I have to homeschool Ilian, I have to do it, and that was important, and then have that open conversation with my boss. So we've all had to really adapt, but boundaries is one that I think we're all grappling with. There is no perfect answer. I think it's what works for you, really.
I think that, yeah, that there's so much there that you've shared that I'm sure will be helpful for so many people on the call. And the interesting thing you mentioned about balance as well as being something that kind of goes hand in hand with boundaries. There's one thing about putting limits in on things that you know you need to put limits in, and there's also how you counterbalance that to have a sense of kind of get back in control. You touched on homeschooling and caring responsibilities, Naz. How has that impacted you?
Yeah, I think it's been interesting. I think, you know, for those of you who have children and have had to homeschool them, I think you can all probably all will have very different experiences, but I think we'll also have very similar ones. And in that it was a really tough time, and not just because you're homeschooling them and you want to make sure they get through their work, but I was actually really concerned about my son's well-being, being away from school, not being in his usual social circle. You know, school is such an important part. You know, the academic attainment is obviously important, but actually the social piece and that routine and wearing a uniform and going to school was really important. So I was always, that's something that kind of was at the back of my head. We also have elderly parents, so we all, you know, equally really concerned about them, you know, particularly my mother-in-law, who would be deemed in the high risk category. So, you know, making sure that she was okay. And given that Jamaat Khana is, you know, still closed, that's a big part of their lives, and actually I could see the impact it was having on them. So I think, you know, all of that, you know, just if you think about it, it was a pretty tough time. I've got to say, you know, there's, you know, you raised about the stat about women, you know, it is true that women pick up most of the caring responsibilities, and however amazing my husband is, and he is very good, he's a very good cook actually, which has been hugely helpful during this time. And you know, he's working from home as well, so we're both navigating our own space. It's been a good test of our marriage, I've got to say. And then caring, and then, you know, homeschooling, my goodness, I tell you, it was just such an interesting and actually quite stressful experience. And I think whatever you say, children naturally gravitate towards their mums. So when they've got a problem with maths, geography or IT, who do they come to? The mum. They don't go to the dad. And I kept saying, go to your dad, he can help you. So yeah, it's a tough one. I'm glad they're back at school. Obviously we don't know what's going to happen and what the future holds, but I think hopefully next time we'll be a bit more prepared for the homeschooling experience. But I think it was just putting things in perspective and making sure that it's not about completing the work, do as much as you can, and his well-being was key.
I've got a comment from Zelobia who doesn't have children at school, so wasn't worried about homeschooling other people, but was doing some schooling for herself, taking online classes to keep her busy. So that's lovely to hear.
Fantastic.
Now, when it comes to work then, what about visibility at work?
Yeah, this is another interesting one that I think that, again, a lot of my peers, female peers, my friends, and again, I'd be really interested to hear from the group here today around visibility, because there's this correlation that lack of visibility affects career progression. And when you're in the office, you're naturally more visible to people around you. But obviously, when you're working from home, you're visible on the camera, but people may not necessarily know what you're doing or what you're working on or what you're thinking, because it's very different in the virtual world, isn't it? It's not that easy to unless you're leading or presenting. You know, visibility is a challenge for women more than it is for men, I guess. And working virtually is so different. So how do you make yourself known while you're dealing with the pressures at home at the same time, and you're looking after children, homeschooling, caring responsibilities, doing all of that? But again, we're quite hard on ourselves again on this. And I think, you know, we just got to put things into perspective a bit. So my advice is around communication. So having a really open relationship with your line manager is important, and my line manager, she's a female, so I guess she does understand, and actually we've had some really open discussions about this. I think communication with my team is really important, so and communication with key stakeholders. So think about who your key stakeholders are where you work, and what do they need to know and what should they know. And taking on projects. So in this new world of virtual working, there are real opportunities to take on projects if you're able to, obviously, and don't sort of overwhelm yourself. So, you know, for example, at Barclays, you know, this new world of working, there's like a working group, everyone's thinking, what does the new world of working going to look like? There's an opportunity there. We've been doing some projects around technology and innovation because that's all accelerated. So think about your business and or where you work. What are the opportunities for you to get involved in and lean in and really get to know different people, because I think geography is not a boundary now. I'm getting to know people from around the world in Barclays, and also give other people opportunities to step up. So what I've done is actually as a leader, you know, I've helped my junior colleagues or people in my team to step up and take responsibilities for things, so they become visible too. And I think that's not just, visibility is not just about me. I think it's about how I help others to achieve. So I think it's both, and you become visible as a result of doing that, because you're helping others to achieve what they need to achieve. So I think it's around contributing ideas as well. So make sure you're contributing ideas, you're coming up with solutions, or you're thinking forward, because this new world of work requires that diversity of thought. And yeah, it's not easy, but there are ways of being visible, and that's how I've been able to sort of navigate that currently at work.
And it's such a resilient kind of way of behaving, isn't it? To understand what's happening and realise what's not in your control and things that you can't change, and then working out different solutions that you might not have thought about before to achieve the things in a different way, which it can be really creative. But it just goes to show that actually there are ways to get things done sometimes, if you can be creative in how you think about achieving them.
Absolutely. And I said there's no fixed working hours. So, you know, there's a young lady in my team who's got a 2-year-old. I've adjusted her working hours. We've worked together to find a pattern that suits her. You know, and she's been able to take a bit more responsibility as a result. So that gives her more visibility and takes the pressure off home life for her. So I think you're absolutely right, Natasha. So being creative, you know, being a leader now is about, you know, emotional intelligence, empathy, and really being creative and innovative.
Yeah, I think Sheila puts it really nicely in a very short sentence: focusing on workable solutions rather than issues.
Yes, exactly. Focusing on the positive. I like that.
And so what about well-being, Naz? It's a big one that we could all talk about probably in a session on its own. What's your experience been?
So yeah, obviously it was important before COVID. I think it's even more important now. Well-being is something that we all grapple with, and in the corporate world, we recognise that, you know, there was a lot of stigma associated with well-being or mental health or mental well-being, however you term it. And actually, you know, to break down some of those stigmas was really key. And now it's even more important than ever. So I think one of the things is around vulnerability. So as a leader, if I'm having a particularly tough day, I share that with my team, because I think authenticity and vulnerability are important, and it kind of just opens the lines of communication, I think, around people sharing and just saying how they feel. I think, you know, I've had, you know, if I be really open with my own team members, I've had some real team members really, really affected by this pandemic. So I had a team member who lost his mother to COVID. So that was a really difficult time for him personally. And it was really difficult for us as a team, because we couldn't comfort him in the normal way we would in the office or visiting him at home or whatever it would be. We were all in lockdown, so we could only offer our lines of communication and just be open and be there for him. I've got somebody who's a single parent. You know, she found it really hard homeschooling, and that impacted her well-being. So I gave her some time off. and just said, take some time out, just work, you know, with your child. It's okay, we'll figure it out. And similarly, I've got graduates who've come on board who, like Iman, have never met us and have come on virtually, and that's, you know, that's really hard when you're trying to build relationships with people. And so some of them have been sort of affected from a well-being perspective. So all sorts of really examples. Those that naturally already had sort of suffered with sort of anxiety or had sort of issues already, these have often been exacerbated during the pandemic. So we provide all the support through work. We've got some amazing resources, but I think it's just showing that you're available, you're there to speak to, that they can come to you and share. And we just, you know, just worked really hard to help them find ways, whether that's giving them time off, adjusting their working hours, or sharing the workload, whatever it may be, just to help them through this time.
Thank you, Naz. We've got some questions in the chat, but we'll come back to them. So keep popping stuff in there. But just to, I guess, round up here in this section, I think we're taking away a couple of things. One is that we're not alone in these thoughts and feelings that we've all experienced in the past few months. We can see from the chat, and Naz, from your experiences, that there's been huge personal impacts to what we've all been dealing with, even if when we're all in very different situations. And so it might not make it materially easier, I guess, but there might be some comfort to be had to know that it's not personal, and that we can use forums like this to share and support each other. The other thing, I guess, that's coming up for me is that there's more change to come. And, you know, there's been huge organisational shifts in such a short space of time, and, you know, arguably maybe it's accelerated things that were going to happen anyway. But we're starting to see some kind of thought leadership on what the future of work might look like as organisations take on board learnings from the past few months and rethink, you know, their way forward. So I guess the roller coaster is continuing its ride, and it's taking us all along with it. And many decisions and changes will remain outside of our control. You know, there's people in the chat talking about, you know, when you start a job without, you know, being in the office. What about when you're at risk of redundancy? All these things that we can't control, but that will impact us all significantly. So to help prepare for this, we're going to talk a bit more about having a sense of personal agency and how we are as we move forward in the face of more change. And we're going to talk about resilience that we can build in ourselves to help us cope. So as we start to think about how we move forward in a positive way, it is worth highlighting the positives that we might have experienced from changes at work. You know, I mentioned earlier about being, you know, starting my business and being a new business owner. One of the things that has been a real positive for me is that I've had more time to work on certain things a lot more deeply than I would have done before. And I think because of that, I've built some more solid foundations than I would have done. And I'm actually starting to reap the benefits of that now. So that's a big positive that I'm taking for myself. Naz, you shared a few. Is there a particular one that you'd like to point out here?
Yeah, I think actually spending more time with my son actually during this time has been a real blessing. You know, as a working mum and, you know, commuting 2.5 hours a day, it was really hard, you know, and actually being at home has been a good thing. I have started to learn some new skills and take care of my health a bit more. And I just slowed down a little bit, actually. I've slowed down and just taken perspective, I think, of things and actually looked at the bigger picture. And yeah, I think that for me is I've never had real time to do that. And I think for me, that's been a real positive in this new age. And in terms of sort of career and thinking ahead, I've actually, you know, thinking about what does the future look like in terms of a career. So there's been a lot of self-reflection and a lot of perspective during this time, Natasha.
So it's important, as we've said, to take time to work out for ourselves how we'll move forward from here, for us to rise up and to take some responsibility for the things that we can control ourselves in the face of change. So we're going to do some breakout groups. And you'll be in breakout groups in pairs, so with one other person. And we'd like you to start to think about how you could have some control over how you might be, over how you might respond, over the actions that you might take over the next few months. So you'll see there's a slide on the screen now with some questions up. And we will share the questions in the chat, so don't worry about writing them down. But what we'd like you to do, and really invite you to do, is to ask each other these 4 questions. And I'd also really encourage you to capture your answers. So whilst we're just setting this up, you might want to grab a pen and paper or your phone notes. But the 4 questions are: what have you learned about yourself over the past 6 months? And this is a reflective question, but a lot of growth and kind of learning can come from reflecting. So if you are the person who's asking this question, I'd really encourage you to ask the question and then hold some silent space for the person in front of you to have a think and to have some time to come up with their answer to the question. The second question is: has this shaped how you want to work in the future? The third question is: what strengths will you develop over the next 3 months? And the final question is: what actions do you commit to over the next 3 months? We'll give you some examples of our answers to the questions. Naz, would you like to go?
So I think, you know, obviously what I've learned about myself in the past 6 months, I've got to say, it's probably I am more resilient than I thought I was. You know, there's been a lot of things thrown at me, and you know, and when I reflect on how I've dealt with them, you can always learn, but I think definitely resilience, and actually how it has shaped how I want to work in the future. Because whilst I do miss my colleagues in the office, I really would value a hybrid way of working. So maybe 2 days in the office and sort of 3 days at home, for example, would actually be ideal. I haven't had that discussion yet. I'll be interested to see, but I know we're thinking of that in the workplace is not as it's going to be as it was before COVID. So that would be sort of just to give you an idea of how I would answer maybe those first 2 questions.
And I think my answer to the question 3 would be discipline. I've realised that I can be incredibly disciplined when I need to rely on myself and when I'm committed to success. So I want to build on that. And the final, my answer to the final one is one of the things I'm going to take some time to time block when I check emails. I've felt some pressure over the last few months, and I keep hitting my inbox refresh button as if it's kind of got all the solutions to my problems. So I'm really going to start to time block when I do something like that, so I can keep calmer and kind of keep the chaos in my mind at bay. Great. Okay. So yeah, I think we're ready, WAP team, for some breakout rooms.
Really.
We're happy to pick up offline because I know we're in the same sector. So if you want to pick up, I'm more than happy to.
That's a very kind offer. Thank you.
No problem.
I think we're just waiting for a few more people to return.
I'm looking forward to all these actions. That's all I can say.
Iman, I think you probably now have almost everybody back in the main room.
Yeah. Perfect.
So I've got my son in the room with me. Here you go. He's trying to hide from everyone.
That's so great. Well, I think I'll hand it back to you guys, and hopefully, I think we've got everyone back, it sounds like.
Yeah, so I hope, you know, that was a useful time to, I think it's nice to reflect with other people and people necessarily you don't know as well. I think is always helpful. Someone who just doesn't know, you won't judge, give a different perspective and to learn from each other. So we were just saying, if you're comfortable, it'd be really good to hear what actions you've committed to over the next 3 months. So happy if you could share in the chat what you've committed to. It'd be really lovely to hear from you. I think there's lots of interesting chat here. So anybody want to share what they've committed to over the next 3 months? I want to learn a lot more about my own faith. That's fantastic. Actually, that's a really good reflection point because that's something I've really missed during COVID is the whole community spirit at Jamaat Khan. I know we have the community spirit online now, which is fantastic.
Being more assertive.
Being more assertive. I'd love to learn about feminist organisation design. That's really interesting.
Assertive and protecting time, and also managing managers' expectations.
Yes.
Yeah. Protecting time, I think, is such a big one, and we've touched on it when we talked about our own experiences earlier.
Time to make decisions and not be so reactive. Yeah, managing upwards is a real skill, definitely. I haven't mastered it, so if anyone can share, I'm more than willing to learn. I think one thing we were discussing with somebody in the group who was talking to us is around mentors and sponsors. So that I think mentors and sponsors now are probably now more important than ever in this virtual world, particularly around visibility and just helping to navigate the organisation. Yeah, finding a mentor. So I see, yeah, that's great. That's a great. Mindfulness and yoga courses, fantastic. Cooking more.
Amira's one there is a great one. It's, you know, if you're going to say yes to some stuff, what are you going to say no to? And actually, you know, Amira's even written the question down, so you can copy that. But I think it's so important to avoid burnout and to kind of maintain well-being. Is to really be aware of the time that you have and that it's finite. And so if you're going to say yes to something new, what are you saying no to?
Absolutely. Well, self-preservation and self-care is probably, again, a really, really important area, particularly now. Honouring the boundaries I set. Good luck with that, Shalina.
Growth mindset, that's a great one. You know, we talked about mental agility and creative problem solving and thinking about different solutions to problems.
Amira, I love your cooking exchange idea. You might want to ask if this group's up for it. Enjoying my hobbies, which I didn't have time before COVID. Yeah, that's lovely. Fantastic. Well, there's some really great commitments here, aren't there?
Yeah. Thank you everyone for sharing, and keep dropping them down. I think there's something to be said for once you share an action and you've just shared it with about 60 people. You know, just even writing it down really does increase the chances of that action being taken. So it's great that you've written it in the chat. I think we'd also encourage you to write it down somewhere at home on a post-it note, in your diary, on your phone. Just make a note of it, put it somewhere, and think about how you might hold yourself accountable to getting that action done.
And Natasha, I just wanted to add, I love how a lot of these are really positive actions as well, and they're not necessarily just about work or, you know, career. There's sort of, you know, yoga, cooking, all these things that people are committing to. I think that's really positive.
Yeah, yeah. Great. So should we head into our final piece, which is a brief touch, and you know, we'd love to talk about this for a lot longer, but actually we would rather talk about it for a few minutes than not at all. And we wanted to talk a bit about resilience. And Naz, is there anything else to add before we go into talking?
No, please go ahead and share your 9 tips, because they're really useful, Natasha.
Great. So we've got, you know, knowing that resilience is the ability to cope with changes and adversity and to recover from them. We've got 9 tips here, and I'm going to give you kind of a one-liner on each of them. And don't worry about all of them, but what I would really encourage you to do is pick the 1 or 2 that resonate with you, the 1 or 2 that you think that really could work for you, and take them away and see how you could expand on them yourself. So there's 9 different boxes up, and I'll just give you a brief kind of one-liner on each of them. So the first one is acceptance. And this is all about accepting what is outside of your control and focusing your energy on what you can control. And that focusing of your energy on what you can control is a much more constructive use of your attention and your energy when it comes to dealing with something that's kind of quite challenging. It is easier said than done, but it is doable. The second one is cognitive flex. It's also called kind of mental agility. And this is about having the mental flexibility to adjust our thoughts and to see adversity as perhaps a challenge to overcome, perhaps seeing it as an opportunity to learn. So there's ways that we can reframe things using our kind of that agility we can have with our thought processes to make them easier to cope with. And actually there's a few articles on this on Forbes and on HBR about how mental agility has become one of the key skills for the workplace, because it does lend itself to adaptability and kind of looking forward, and being solution oriented. And the third tip is perspective. So ask yourself this very, very simple but very, very effective question: will this matter in 12 months' time? And it's a really simple question, but when you're hit with something and you can sit there and go, will this matter in 12 months' time? And sometimes it will, and sometimes it won't. But putting the challenge into the context of a bigger picture can really help enable you to deal with it and respond to it in a way that you might not have done had you not given yourself that brief moment. Naz, I wonder, do you have any thoughts on those first three that we've been to from your own experience that you've used? Naz, you're on mute.
Navigating technology should be on there too. I think well, you've touched on the first, acceptance is, I think the real, you're absolutely right, but accepting of what's not in your control is a really big thing, because you can just start to worry about things that are just that you're not able to solve. And I think that, you know, I sort of compartmentalize my challenges, and I sort of think, well, can I do something about that? Yes or no? Can I do something about it? Yes, I can. So then that helps me kind of think through certain situations, be that work or personal. So for me, acceptance really resonated, Natasha.
Great. Thank you, Naz. So the next three, if we go through routine. So this is about countering any physical or mental chaos with a sense of structure and routine to help you cope. Boundaries. This is about, we talked about this, and Naz had some really, really kind of lovely advice on this, but prevent adding to the chaos or uncertainty by creating a bit more clarity, having and finding more balance, and doing that through setting limits. And again, it came up in the chat. So if you're saying yes to something, what are you saying no to? Have that boundary of how much of yourself you will give to work or anything else where you're feeling stretched. Mastery. I really like this one. Mastery is about finding motivation through excelling at something that's important to you. So something that you really care about, something that really excites you, that you really enjoy. How can you apply yourself to excel at it? Because when you're excelling and learning and flexing those muscles, you're also building your confidence and you're building your belief in yourself. And by doing that, you're building resilience as a byproduct. And I think that's a really lovely way of looking at building resilience, which is a little bit more indirect. But if that's something that's resonating with you and you're thinking, gosh, I used to do that 5 years ago and I loved it and I haven't done it since, but it made me feel really, really brilliant. Think about how you might expand on that. Strengths is about identifying and playing to your strengths. How can you create more value by using them more? So, this is a bit about job crafting as well. If it doesn't have to be in your job description, but if there's something you can do at work for your team, for your department, for your manager, for the company, that's not necessarily written into something that you should be doing, but you know that you can do it because it's one of your strong points, then find a way of contributing to that and adding value and expanding how you apply your strengths at work. Again, it's similar to mastery in that it will help you build confidence in yourself. It builds real positive thinking. And again, you're building resilience on the side of that. Social support. So think about the people, the communities that you're part of or that you have access to, that give you energy, that help you feel motivated, that give you hope, that help you feel comfort, and find ways to increase the presence of those people, those communities, whatever that is. Find ways to increase the presence of that in your life. And then the final one is purpose. And in a job context, I think this is about knowing the purpose of your job or your role. And that is the ability to kind of connect your role and your day-to-day to something that's much bigger than you are. So how do you connect what you're doing to, the future of your team or the end state of a project or the progress of your company. Because if you have clarity on what you're trying to achieve and what your contribution is to that and the role that you play, and why that role is important, you're building your resilience as well, because you have a sense of meaning, and having a sense of meaning is a driver of resilience. So I'd say this is twofold. If you're unsure about your role and the meaning of your role and the purpose of your role, talk to someone, talk to your manager, talk to your head of your department, talk to someone who can help you fill in the gaps on that. And I would also say, if you are a leader, if you are a manager, if you're responsible for a team in some shape or form, give clarity to the people who are part of that team, and ensure that they know the purpose of what they're doing, ensure they understand the role that they play and the value that they're there to contribute to you know, in context of the department, the team, the company, whatever makes sense in your context. So I think about one or two of those 9 that really resonate with you. Naz, anything to add or any perspective on the last 6 that I talked through?
No, I mean, boundaries we've covered, really important, and one that we all grapple with, but there's no perfect answer to boundaries. Boundaries mean different things to different people. Social support has been critical for me. There's a term I use for negative people in my life sometimes, whether that's work or people who just generally, they call them mood hoovers, and I've kind of gently kind of removed myself from those, and just people, as you say, who give you a source of comfort that you can talk to, who make you laugh. So I sort of have regular catch-ups with my social circle, and that has really helped me. And I love the purpose bit. I think, you know, I feel a real sense of purpose in what I'm doing. I can see directly how we're impacting the charity sector and how we're making a difference, and that makes me feel really kind of proud to do what I'm doing, and that's kind of my North Star when I'm having a bad day at work or whatever. I'm just kind of, what am I trying, what's the end result here? And actually that purpose bit is so critical to achieving and really enjoying what you're doing.
That's it for the resilience tips. And if you're happy to, I mean, the chat's been on fire, which is great. So do drop in the couple that have resonated with you and the things that maybe you commit to thinking a bit more about and expanding on, to help you take charge and take responsibility for how you might be in the next few months as changes at work continue to happen around us.
Brilliant, fantastic. So I think now it's kind of time to wrap up. So I just wanted to leave you with something that I use all the time, which is positive affirmations. Yes, so I used to use these quite a bit, but I'm using them even more, I find, during my time, during the past 6 months, really. And I find that if positive affirmations really help me if I'm having a particularly down day, if I'm having a particularly bad day, or I feel I haven't achieved something that I set out to achieve, or if I've done something not particularly well. And these are 3 that I use. You're welcome to use them, or you're welcome to create one of your own, or use something that kind of resonates with you. But I love the I am powerful, I am resourceful, I am enough, I have enough, I do enough. That's great for the boundaries piece. And I am a conscious creator, and I have the ability to create the life I make. So I love that one. That's quite powerful. And what I do is I stick them up, one on my screen. I have one in my notebook, one on my mirror when I'm brushing my teeth or doing my hair in the morning. They're where they're visible. And I just kind of, the more you see them, the more you read them, the more that they are sort of positive affirmations, and they kind of switch the mindset on a particularly bad day. So we wanted to leave you with that, because I think that's a really great way to kind of end the session with positive affirmations. But feel free to use those or one that you love yourself, and do share any others that you use. I do really like them. I have them stuck all around the room. So yeah, I think that kind of draws our session to a close, Natasha. So I think we're handing back to the WAP team now.
Yes, I think we're done. And thank you everyone for staying with us.
Yeah, brilliant. And I know there's lots of questions in the chat that perhaps we didn't get a chance to do just simply because of time, but I don't know, WAP team, if you want to send some of those questions or how you want to address those, but do let us know.
Thank you guys so much.
you.
You can all hear me, yes?
Thank you so much. It is very beneficial, and your presentation is so good, so wonderful. And I think we will remember your words and we will benefit from them all. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Faika. That's lovely. Thank you.
That's lovely. Thank you. And yeah, to just reiterate that sentiment, honestly, an absolute pleasure listening to you both speak. I kind of have 3 key takeaways for myself because there was just so much information and I want to be able to incorporate it all. But mine, for what it's worth for everyone else, I wrote down authenticity and vulnerability. I just think that as a soundbite is so lovely and such a great thing to keep top of mind throughout all of this. And I think it's something that's even harder to achieve behind a screen. So I think really working to strive for that can only make you stronger, both in your personal life and in your career. The fact that you can have it all, but not at once, I think that's great. And in my breakout session, I think we discussed that concept a lot. I think it's really nice to think about it as, you know, there is this entire whole picture you can achieve, but it's taking it in manageable bite-sized chunks, which is something that's super relevant for me because having just started a new job and having just moved out and no longer having my mum's lovely cooking and her helping with laundry, you know, those kind of things are really great to remember, that it's breaking it down and taking it as manageable steps. And then thirdly, just the 9 tips I think are wonderful. And the 2 I plan to think about are routine and perspective. Routine for me was actually the question about what have I learned in the last 6 months. I actually wrote down that I thrive off routine, which is something I never really thought I needed that much. But having had that space that the pandemic did create for me really made me realize that even if it's scheduling time to not do anything, that works better for me. So I want to explore that more. And in terms of perspective, I just think it's an incredibly important thing to bear in mind. You both touched on it so much. And funnily enough, my mentor said to me last week, I'm in PR. And he was like, Iman, if you're ever panicking, just remember it's PR, not ER, which was, it's just stayed with me now. And it puts perspective on my day. So I hope to keep building on those 2. And also, I can't wait to sit down this weekend with us some hot chocolate and think about my own affirmations, because I think that's a really powerful idea. So thank you both again for the time. Just to kind of wrap up, everyone, thank you for participating and for your engagement in the chat. We're now closing up the session. On the screen right now, you'll see some signposts to our resources in the UK. So these include the Aga Khan Economic Planning Board, the Health Board, the Social Welfare Board, and of course WAP. We also have the Coronavirus Helpline included there. If you're not from the UK jurisdictions and you're not sure where to go for support, please do reach out to any of these teams still, and we'd all be really happy to help. And in terms of the Sisterhood, our next session will be on the 21st of October. We'll be having an external speaker, and marketing in Al-Sahara social media will be shared in the coming weeks, as well as via our Sisterhood mailing list, which I hope you're all on. And just to highlight, recordings from our previous sessions are available on Ismaili YouTube. So if you just type into Google Ismaili Sisterhood, UK Ismaili Sisterhood, it will show up. And we'll also put the playlist link in the chat now for you all. But hopefully if you found this one useful and you're keen to look back at what we've explored in previous months, please feel free to take a look. Brilliant. And it sounds like you've all very kindly filled in your evaluations. So on that note, thank you, Nazreen and Natasha, again for leading the session and sharing your experiences and insights so openly with us all. And thank you all for joining us today. On behalf of the entire WAP team, I'd really like to wish you all a great week and warm wishes for calm, strength, peace, and good health. Take good care, everyone stay well, and please remember we are one Jamaat and we're all here to support each other. So don't hesitate to reach out to your sisters, your family, your friends whenever needed. Yalim with it and